Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Faith Brunel's Insights, the podcast. I'm ugh, I'm Faith Brunel. See everybody, this is why I love editing. I'm Faith Brunel, and welcome back to season 6 and episode 16 with Dan Harrison. Hi Dan, how are you today?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you, Faith, and thanks very much for inviting me to come on the podcast.
No problem, Dan. It's great to have you here. So Dan, I'm just going to hand over to you briefly to introduce yourself to the listeners for us today.
Okay, great. So I'm Dan, as you mentioned. I'm the head of media and communications for Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, which is, for those of you who don't know what a Chamber of Commerce does, we're a business support organisation based in Birmingham, West Midlands, and we basically help local businesses in our area connect, support, and grow and access opportunities both locally, nationally, and internationally. And I'm in charge of the media and communications element of the organisation, which is, as my job title would suggest.
Excellent, Dan. I think you cut out slightly there, but I think because of the software on, it should fill in that gap. But thank you, Dan, for giving us but thank you, Dan, for talking us through your role at the Birmingham Chambers of Commerce and really speaking to us about the kind of nuances of the role as well. And so, just want to delve into some questions today and talk to you a little bit about your role in a bit more depth because I am familiar of the chambers. But for those who aren't familiar with the chambers, thank you for really giving a context about who they are and who they strive to support. So, in your role as the head of media and communications, can you talk to us about a kind of day-to-day role in terms of what kind of things you do really as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've got a great team alongside me actually, of two relatively newcomers who journalism graduates. That I say newcomers, they've now been with us for about 18 months, who look after particular sides of the elements of the department, which I'll come on to. And then we've got two more experienced kind of part-time members of staff who have been in the media game for a number of years, bring a tremendous amount of experience to the table. But collectively, we produce a monthly magazine called Chamberlink, which is the flagship publication of the Chamber, and it's usually around 92 pages every month, full of news, views, opinions, big interviews with various members of the business community, our Chamber member businesses, and material we've generated ourselves about campaigns that we're running internally. And then alongside that, there's a sister daily digital news bulletin called Chamberlink Daily. And again, same sort of thing, news from across the West Midlands business community, largely our chamber members, which is our membership's made up of around 2,500 businesses. And again, the chamber itself commenting on the big issues of that particular day, whether it be job figure announcements, GDP, anything that's going on politically that impacts on business. And then on top of that, the external media relations side. So we're always looking to try and get our organisation and sometimes some of our smaller businesses within membership some exposure on TV or radio or in print. So we'll liaise with the local media on that aspect. And then, of course, there's the ever-growing digital side. We work with the marketing team on social media, and then we also produce our own podcasts as well.
Excellent, Dan. That's really interesting. And I'm actually about to ask you about your own podcast because it really piqued my interest when I was researching you today to have a look and understand your background. But just before I get to the podcasting element, thank you for really going into depth and sharing a lot about the chambers as well in terms of your day to day, having a look at your engagement with both the internal and external media teams as well. It really does sound really interesting. And what really grabbed my attention was how you continue to support small businesses as well to kind of access those opportunities and get that exposure that they will need in terms of allowing people to know where they are and what they offer. So thank you very much for diving into that. And really, I noticed that you have a background in sports journalism, and I was really interested in how that's kind of shaped and influenced your approach as the head of media and communications at the Chambers.
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. And I think when you've worked in journalism of any speciality or sector, the ability to identify, I guess, a good story, it becomes a sixth sense, and that doesn't really matter to whether you're working in sport or in politics or in music or in entertainment. You just have that ingrained. It becomes ingrained in you to spot the good story and the best line, as we would call it. So, I covered semi-professional sport early in my career, mainly football, and then I had the opportunity to go and work for Aston Villa Football Club in the Premier League as a club journalist. And you used to hear all the time cliches about footballers and their IQ, and they talk in cliches, and they seldom have anything interesting to say. And then, we'd get people from other media organisations. You'd be turning up to do something, and they would say, "Oh, we're interviewing this player today. What are they like? Are they any good at talking?"
Yeah.
But actually, somebody who a couple of people who I was quite close to in the sort of West Midlands sports media scene, they imparted on to me basically that actually it's our job to everybody's got a good story in them, and it's our job to
Yeah.
draw something out of them, and almost
To find it.
to unpick that lock. Football people, as are people from other industries, they've got a tremendous skill set in a particular area, and that does so.
Yeah.
So why should they be like a cross between Ricky Gervais and Barack Obama when you put a microphone in front of them? That's our job to
Yeah.
find a sweet spot to draw something out of them. So, and I think you can apply that anywhere, whether you're talking to a business or somebody from any walk of life. I think you might in business you might go, well, this company's a manufacturer and they make components for a particular part of a car. They're not going to have anything interesting to talk about. But actually, if you're well prepared and you get them into that sweet spot, and everybody's got something interesting or a bit out of the ordinary
Yeah.
to talk about.
I think that's really insightful and that's really interesting as well because everybody has a story to tell. It's just the way that story comes out and the way that it's extracted. And I think by being in the right environment as well, that person would feel more confident, more comfortable to really share their story. So thank you, Dan, for diving into that. And really, what I'm interested in is looking at because I'm really interested in looking at how the chambers and through your roles as head of media communications helps people who have a business, who have an idea. But what advice would you give to people who, let's say, they have the ideas but they're not the most confident in terms of communication? How can they really kind of break through their comfort zone?
I think it's clarity is a big thing when it comes to communications. Being clear, being concise, and keeping it simple as well. We deal with companies that are multinational, like Jaguar Land Rover, who are based here in Birmingham, but they sell cars all over the world. Mondelez, who are the brand behind Cadbury's chocolate, which again founded here, but you can find their products on shelves in any country. But then we deal with companies at the other end of the chain who are one man bands who've started, or one woman bands who've started up whatever it is they do. They've started in their garage at home or something, and it really does take all sorts. And we do have those businesses who they perhaps haven't got that expertise to get their story out there. But yes, I always say to them to to keep it simple. And I think we all get entrenched in our own space and uh, our own perception of what other people think of things. But actually, I think you always have to assume that there are people consuming your material that haven't really got a clue about your subject matter, or
Yeah.
know very little about it. So you have to
Hmm.
break it down to as though you're going to explain it to those people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think it really goes back to the rules of engagement as well, because you can't walk into an environment people don't know what's going on, and then kind of bring in all this jargon or all these fancy words, and like, I don't know what's, and then they're probably thinking to themselves, I don't know what's happening. And as you mentioned, Dan, it's really about breaking it down and bringing it to them, making it accessible, making it understandable, as you said, keeping it
Yeah,
simple and giving that
yeah. I
clarity
had
as
a I
well.
had a brilliant journalism lecturer at college, and
Mm,
when he was kind of talking to us about how to construct a news article, he'd always say, "Well, would the bloke down the pub understand it?" And I think he's probably taking it to the extreme a little bit in that sense, but I think the
mm,
general point he was trying to make certainly applies.
definitely. Yeah, again, 100%, Dan, just to really echo and to resonate with what you just said as well. You have to be accessible. It has to be understandable as well. Because your audience has to understand what's going on, who you are, and what you bring to the table. And really, that's the essence of communications, really, in media, which you just mentioned. So thank you for giving that personal anecdote there. And just delving further, I know that these aren't the questions that I've given you, Dan. So thank you very much for really for really going with the
That's okay.
flow, because I am that kind of person. I am that interviewer who will just put out questions as well. But I'm really interested. I'm really interested about a few things actually. The first thing is about the magazine that you mentioned. So talk to me about the magazine. Talk to me about how people can access the magazine, and also secondary to that, talk to me about the kind of chambers membership and the benefit of having a chambers membership as a small business or even as a large business.
Okay, I'll take the magazine point first. So it's called Chamberlink, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
it's available to all members of the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce, but you can also access the digital version on our website, www.greaterbirminghamchambers.com. Quick plug there. But yeah, it's got a readership of about 12,500 people, and as I say, it averages around 92 pages every month. And I think we really kind of hold high standards. It's something we're really proud of. It's edited by a colleague of mine called, and a really sort of important mentor in my career, really called John Lamb. I succeeded him in this role, and he stayed on to edit our magazine on a part-time basis. But he's an old Fleet Street journalist. He's done various editing roles in the newspaper industry, and he really holds high standards about the way we put the magazine together. And we really do strike the balance well between doing what adds value to our members, but also our journalistic standards and integrity as well. And it's there's I mean, I'm biased, but I think there's always something interesting to read, whether it be a big interview with an important business personality or a deep dive into a particular topic. So, for example, I don't know when this podcast will go out, but we're in March now, and the current edition, it had all the roundup from our big awards ceremony. Was a big piece which we would do every year, but it also coincided with International Women's Day. So my colleague Ferran, he's done quite a big piece on that and interviewed 7 trailblazing women from the West Midlands business community, which really made a nice 3-page feature. And then John Griffin, a colleague of ours who worked with us, he's done an interview with the new chief executive of the NEC Group, which, for those of you who don't know, is a large entertainment operator here in Birmingham. They operate the National Exhibition Centre, which has just had Crufts there, and then has 2 arenas as well, the Utilita Arena and the Resorts World Arena, which have big concerts and shows, etc.
Yeah. Excellent, Dan. And I was actually smiling there. I'm glad you mentioned the International Women's Day interviews with the 7 women, because my mom actually was interviewed. Her name's
No way.
Vivian Pommel, and she was actually interviewed by
Oh
your
wow.
colleague Ferran. So I was just laughing there. And she actually posted it today holding the magazine. I took the photograph. So it was just nice to resonate.
Oh, it's brilliant.
There.
Well, I'm not just saying this for the podcast, but we were looking at stats earlier, and it's been really well received. That one has. So,
and she was showcased. Yeah, and she was really she was showcased there. I think you cut out there, Dan, slightly. So please repeat what you just said about the International Women's Day.
Which bit do you want me to start from?
I think I mentioned about my mom being there. I think I missed the end. I think I missed the start of what you were saying.
That's brilliant. And we were looking at the stats this morning. I'm not just saying this because of what you've just told me, but it has been really well received, that interview, in terms of the readership figures. So.
Well, excellent. I'll tell my mom.
Yeah, please do, and tell her thanks for sharing it as well. Yeah, so.
I will. So that's a shout out to my mom, Vivian Pommel, and Learn with Lalanya, who was interviewed by Ferran. But yeah, that's funny. It's a really small world actually, because I was literally taking the photograph of her with the magazine a couple of days ago. But really, thank you, Dan, for sharing about the magazine Chamberlink, for sharing about how it helps businesses, companies, and I would definitely echo what you just said. It's really interesting to read an editorial piece about a CEO of a FTSE 500 company, for example, or any company, company that's really made such a positive impact really in society or in that particular space. So thank you very much for sharing that. And really just finally, as we wrap up today, can you just talk to me about a little bit about your experience, because I know that you are a podcaster as well, so it's always nice to have a fellow podcaster on the show. So talk to me about if you have your own podcast or if you podcast and where you podcast and how people can
Okay,
access
yeah.
that.
So I mean, it's been a while actually since I've done anything on the mic, so to speak. So I've hosted podcasts in the past for the Chamber, and then a couple of side projects that I was involved with. These days, I'm more behind the controls. So our chief executive, Henrietta Brealey, she has her own podcast called CEO Stories, which I'm again behind the scenes. I record, produce, edit, give her a bit of a hand in terms of researching the backgrounds of the guests and the questions. And I mean, it's to be honest with you, it's become my favourite platform to consume media, just because of the depth that you can go into. I mean, we've been on for like 15 minutes now, and I feel like we've covered so much already. And
Yeah,
um, that
literally.
just as an example, and it's that depth that you probably can't go into on a maybe a on video even, or and certainly in print where you're limited by space, and it's very intimate as well when people are
Yeah.
listening in their headphones. So yeah, I work with alongside Henrietta for her podcast CEO Stories, and it's just great fun in terms of what we learn from people. Again, it's high profile guests in terms of leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs from our region, and it's great not only hearing about their successes but their vulnerabilities, and also finding out stuff that's just a little bit out of left
Yeah.
field too.
Yeah, completely, Dan, and thank you very much for sharing that. I'd again completely echo what you've just said again for the third time. But really, speaking about that, it's really important to understand how someone has had resilience as well, how they've overcome certain struggles and adversities. I think that actually allows you to understand the depth and the breadth of a person and understanding their personality and really about their unique journey. Which and the word journey is really an important word to Faith Brunel's Insights, because our mantra is it's not an event, it's a journey, and your journey can begin now. And on that note, it's the end of today's episode. But thank you to Dan Harrison, the head of media and communications at the Greater Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, for coming on today and for really giving me a great insight, because that's our key word. It's in the podcast name, about your role. So finally, how can the listeners contact you
Okay,
today?
great. Yeah, so I'm on X and Instagram at Harrison Media HQ, and then I'm Dan Harrison on LinkedIn too, if you would like to get in touch.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you very much. And thank you once again to all of my listeners for continuing to tune in, continuing to have all those insights. Remember, it's not an event, it's a journey. I'm Faith Brunel, and this is your host, and I'm signing off. Have a great day and a great week, everybody. Bye, everybody.